Today here in Robert's Guitar Dungeon, we're going to talk about understanding how the used guitar market works. I did a video a while back on understanding how Guitar Center buys used gear, and I got a lot of comments and a lot of feedback on that particular video. A lot of people seem to agree with a lot of what I said, and a lot of other people that didn't. And those that disagreed, I kept seeing the same thing over and over again. And without going into detail about what those disagreements were over, it was the same recurring theme over and over again. And there are simply a lot of people out there that just don't have a firm grasp on how the used guitar market works. So I decided I'd do a video on this, and I put together a few points here that we are going to discuss. So without further ado, let's get to it. Rule number one, guitars depreciate fast. And I mean all capital letters fast. How fast is that specifically? To be specific, when you buy a guitar at a new price, for example, the Fender Standard Stratocaster, which is a guitar that I'm going to refer to very frequently as an example in this video because it is very common on both the new and the used market. When you buy a new Fender Stratocaster or a Made in Mexico Stratocaster at a brand new price of $599, that guitar is no longer worth $599 at the point that your return policy expires, be it 30 days or 45 days or whatever the retailer's policy is that you bought it from. As soon as that return policy expires, your chances of getting $599 back out of that guitar are next to nothing. Guitars depreciate very, very quickly. At that point, they are now considered used. Number two, new guitar prices are virtually worthless when talking about the used guitar market. Again, a Fender Made in Mexico Standard Stratocaster sells brand new for $599 currently. That $599 has absolutely nothing to do with a used price on those guitars. Those guitars are all over the place on the used market, and they currently sell actual completed transactions pretty consistently on eBay right now for about 300 bucks. When trying to find out what an actual market price is on a used piece of gear, completed listings on eBay is usually the most accurate place to go. The reason why new prices have nothing to do with this is because a lot of people think that if they bought a guitar new, that they're going to be able to get most of their money back out of it. And unfortunately, I got some bad news for you. That's just not the case. If you bought a brand new Fender Stratocaster for $599, you're going to try to sell it used for $499. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because if you wait for the right coupon or the right promotion or the right whatever from any number of musical instrument retailers that carry that particular guitar, you can get a discount that's going to be real close to that $499 used price, if not even a little bit better on occasion. It just doesn't make sense for somebody to buy a used guitar for $499 when they can buy a new one for the same price and get a full manufacturer's warranty, as well as the backing from the retailer that bought it from. Number three, asking prices, also useless. As Rick Harrison on Pawn Star says all the time, people can ask whatever they want, but that does not determine the value of a guitar, or any piece of gear for that matter. Again, going to eBay or Reverb or any number of other places and looking up what people are asking for the same particular piece of gear that you're trying to sell does not do you any good whatsoever in trying to come up with a value of that particular piece. Remember, a used piece of gear is only worth what somebody is willing to pay for it. And if nobody's willing to pay your asking price, again, that does not determine the value. Once again, completed listings on eBay is your friend. Number four, modifications on a guitar do not generally increase the value of that guitar. Let's take our Made in Mexico Fender Stratocaster. This is a very common guitar on the used market, and this is also a guitar that people like to modify very heavily. One reason why people like to modify it is because, quite honestly, changing out the pickups and the hardware and all that kind of stuff, you're generally not going to devalue it at all. But by doing so, you make it your own personalized guitar, and if you ever go to sell it in that condition, you're basically looking for your doppelganger to sell it to, because most likely any prospective buyers for that guitar are not exactly going to be interested in the same specs that you have put on it. So if you took out the factory pickups and replaced them with Fender Texas Special pickups or whatever it may be, that does not necessarily guarantee that it's going to increase the value. If I'm buying that guitar, personally, that I'm not paying any extra for those pickups because I still got to swap them out. And that's going to be the general consensus, again, of most people that are going to be a prospective buyer of that particular piece of gear. Number 5. Vintage gear and used gear are not the same markets. Vintage gear, there are so many more meticulous little details that have to be taken into account, particularly when you're talking about a high-end vintage piece, that can affect the value one way or the other. On a really, really high-end, rare Les Paul, 59 Les Paul for example, if the pickguard screws have been replaced, that can affect the value by thousands of dollars. The used market isn't quite this volatile. That said, the people that are shopping on the used market are also not the same people shopping on the vintage market. Vintage market is, in a lot of cases, going to be collectors and people that collect gear a lot more than they play it. The used market is generally going to be specifically for players looking for the best deal on whatever piece of gear it is that they're searching for. So take that into consideration. Let's talk about a few things that can affect used market pricing. First thing on this sub list is going to be new price fluctuation. Again, let's go back to our Made in Mexico Fender Standard Stratocaster. The price on this guitar recently increased from $499 to $599. I just looked it up before I started recording this video, and currently used prices for that guitar are still hovering right around $300. However, I would expect the used prices for these guitars to start creeping up around $350 to $400 sometime in the next couple of years. And the reason why I know that is because about 10 years ago, that guitar was $399. When that guitar was $399, the used price on that guitar was $249 all day long. Just about anywhere you looked on the used market, a used Made in Mexico Strat was about $249. And then in about 2009, they increased the price to $499. When that happened, it took a couple of years, but by about 2011 or so, the value of a used Made in Mexico Strat was very consistently right around the $300 mark, which again, as I mentioned before, is where it currently sits today. So yes, there are occasions that new prices can affect the price of a used guitar, but again, to affect the entire market like that, in this instance, it's going to take a while for it all to trickle down. Here's another example. Remember this guitar? This is the Fender Joe Strummer Telly. When this guitar came out, these were about a $1,200 guitar, I believe, off the top of my head. The point came that Fender dealers were overloaded with these things, and Fender eventually discontinued them. So the ones that were left over were forced to be clearanced out, and Fender set the clearance price on these guitars at $599. Now, just prior to this happening, used Joe Strummer Tellys were selling on the used market for around $700 or $800. When Fender lowered the price on them to get rid of them, it absolutely killed the value of the ones on the used market, and suddenly they weren't worth much more than about $400 to $450. This was, of course, temporary, as the market has seemed to have come back on these, again based on their original value, but there was a stretch there for a couple of years when you were better off just hanging on to them and waiting to see if the value came back, because Fender themselves were responsible for tanking the value there for a while. Also, the rarity of a particular piece can affect the value. I have featured my Gibson Zakk Wylde Vertigo Les Paul in several of my videos, and this is a guitar that was a limited run by Gibson. I believe they only made 300 or 400 of them. This guitar sold brand new for $22.99. The used market right now, because they were no longer made and they were in such short production when they were made, these seem to be selling right around the $3,000 mark, give or take, just depending on the day. I personally kind of have my fingers crossed that the value on this continues to decline, especially since Zakk Wylde left Gibson in the last couple of years, and Gibson just isn't, they're never going to make any more of these. However, again, this is a unique instance, and this is really more the exception than it is the rule. Things like this, especially for older guitars, Jeff Hanneman signature ESPs from the 80s, for example, 80s and 90s, those guitars are a lot more rare, and a lot of that has to do with its relation to the artist itself. So sometimes these are almost can be considered vintage guitars, But, you know, again, these are the exceptions, not the rule. Production also is another thing that can affect it. The Analog Man King of Tone is a great example of this. To order that pedal brand new, the waiting list on that is right around the 18-month mark right now. And guys on pedal forums, there's plenty of people in line because it's a fantastic overdrive and one that is very highly sought after. However, they're a really small company and they just don't have the production to be able to keep up with the demand. That said, if a used one does pop up on the market, you can buy it now. However, you're probably going to pay more than what you would pay for a new one just because you're essentially paying a convenience fee in that instance. They don't pop up used very often, but when they do, if they're new, I think they're around the $300 mark brand new. I've seen guys pay $350, $400, or $500 for used ones just so they don't have to sit in line. And one last thing that a lot of people are probably not even aware affects the used market is what the dealer cost is on a new one. Remember the Charvel Desolation series guitars? Why they discontinued them, I'm not sure, but what I can tell you is when they came out, the dealer cost on those was very low and there was a lot of margin in those guitars. The top tier in that series, I actually happen to own the Skatecaster model out of that, and those sold brand new for $649. Dealer cost on those was around $200, and there was a lot of people, a lot of employees working for guitar shops that were able to buy them that cheap brand new. And when Charvel discontinued them, all of a sudden they hit the used market. These were featured on the Musician's Friend Stupid Deal of the Day a few times towards the end of their run. I actually bought mine on a Stupid Deal of the Hour for $199. And I wasn't the only one with that idea. A lot of people were buying them for $250 there the last year or so that they were made, because dealers were running just these absolutely stupid, ridiculous sale prices on them. So, unfortunately, when that hit, that saturated the market with them, and it not only did that, but it saturated the market at real cheap prices. To this day, those guitars sell used for about $250, and honestly, it's if you're just not buying one, you're getting a great value because you got a lot of guitar for the money. Again, this is more of an exception than it is a rule. Guitars generally do not have that much profit margin in them. I don't know how they were actually able to pull that off with this particular series of guitars, but at any rate, that was the case. And the other thing to keep in mind is if you have one of these and you're trying to sell it back to a reseller, particularly one that is a dealer, they are not going to pay more for a used one than what it originally cost them to buy a new one. That's another reason why the used market on things like that takes a major hit. Okay, so hopefully you found this video helpful and informative. Please leave me a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. If you have any questions, that's also a very good way to contact me. Also, all of my other various methods of contact are also going to be listed down in the description. I will post links to any other videos and gear mentioned in this video as well in the description. And last but not least, if you enjoyed this video and you happen to find it helpful and informative, please consider hitting the subscribe button and also the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. You will get alerts of when I upload new videos every week on Wednesday and Saturday mornings. Thank you so much for watching. You know what? There are tons of young people out there that want to get involved in music and do not have the means to do so. If you are watching this video, most likely you're a musician, and many experienced musicians have tons of broken and unwanted gear lying around that they're not doing anything with. Please visit my friends at Share the Music on Facebook at the link below and learn how you and your unwanted gear can help change somebody's life.